I'm Ella Winters, 31 years old, and I thought I'd cried my last tear over empty nurseries and broken dreams. 3 miscarriages in 2 years had hollowed me out, left me and my husband Daniel clinging to each other in the wreckage of what should have been. We'd name each baby we lost. Lily Grace, who slipped away at 12 weeks. Oliver James, who we held for 20 minutes before his tiny heart stopped at 23 weeks. Sophie Rose, who never made it past 8 weeks, but who I'd already imagined reading bedtime stories to. Those names were sacred to us, whispered in grief support groups and carved into the memorial stones we placed under 3 dogwood trees in Forest Park. Then my sister Nicole called me, her voice bubbling with excitement about her newborn triplets, and told me their names. Lily Grace Cooper. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Oliver James Cooper. Sophie Rose Cooper. When I asked her why, she smiled that perfect influencer smile and said, "I'm completing your family for you. Now those beautiful names get to live." I stared at her, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone, and something inside me that had been bending for years finally snapped. What I did next tore our family apart, exposed secrets that should have stayed buried, and forced everyone to choose a side. If you've ever had someone take something precious and call it a gift, drop your story in the comments. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs long before Nicole's triplets were born. My life in Portland had become a carefully constructed routine designed to keep me functional, to prevent me from dissolving into the grief that lurked at the edges of every moment. I'd wake at 5:30 each morning in our small 2-bedroom apartment in the Cascade View complex, the second bedroom still empty despite Daniel's suggestions that we turn it into a home office or a gym. I couldn't bring myself to fill that space with anything that admitted defeat. The room stayed empty, door closed, a monument to futures that never materialized. My nursing shifts at Riverside Memorial Hospital started at 7, which meant I had 90 minutes to shower, choke down toast I couldn't taste, and drive through Portland's morning traffic while listening to podcasts about anything except pregnancy or parenting. I'd specifically curated my feed to exclude those topics, but the algorithm didn't always cooperate. 3 times in the past month, an ad for prenatal vitamins had interrupted a true crime story, and each time I'd had to pull over until my hands stopped shaking on the steering wheel. Working in pediatrics after losing 3 babies felt like cosmic punishment some days. I'd chosen this specialty before the miscarriages, back when I thought I'd be the cool nurse who understood both sides, who could comfort parents because I was one too. Now I smiled at exhausted mothers in the NICU, held their crying infants with practiced gentleness, and felt absolutely nothing except a dull ache that had become so constant I barely noticed it anymore. My coworkers knew about my losses. They'd sent cards after each one, had given me space when I returned to work with dark circles and a mechanical smile. Nobody asked when Daniel and I would try again. That courtesy felt like kindness and abandonment in equal measure. Daniel worked as a software engineer for a startup downtown, his office a 15-minute walk from our apartment. He'd leave at 8, kiss my forehead if I was still home, and spend his days writing code for an app one didn't fully understand, but that seemed to make him happy. We'd met 7 years ago at a friend's wedding, bonded over our shared hatred of the chicken dance, and married 18 months later in a small ceremony at Hoyt Arboretum. Back then we talked about having 3 or 4 kids, about the chaos of a full house and family road trips down the coast. Now we talked about meal planning, and whether we needed to replace the living room carpet. The space where those future children should have been stretched between us like a canyon we were both too tired to bridge. My best friend Jessica had known me since college, back when we'd shared a dorm room and stayed up too late arguing about philosophy and eating ramen. She'd become a high school English teacher, married her girlfriend Kate 3 years ago, and recently started the process of adopting a child from foster care. Jess was the only person besides Daniel who knew the full weight of what I carried. She'd sat with me in hospital rooms, had held my hand during the support group meetings I'd tried and abandoned, had never once said any of the useless platitudes people offer when they don't know what else to say. When I needed to escape the careful sympathy in Daniel's eyes, I'd meet Jess at the Bean and Leaf, our regular coffee shop on Hawthorne, and she'd let me sit in silence or rage or tears without trying to fix anything. Nicole, my younger sister by 3 years, had always been the golden child in our family. Where I was quiet and practical, Nicole was vibrant and magnetic. She'd been homecoming queen, had dated the captain of the football team, had glided through life collecting achievements and admirers like some people collect stamps. After college, she'd stumbled into social media influencing almost by accident, posting aesthetic photos of her breakfast and her outfits, and somehow that had snowballed into 50,000 followers and sponsorship deals with brands I'd never heard of. Her Instagram handle, Nicole Lives Loud, was aggressively accurate. Everything in her life was performed for an audience, filtered and captioned and hashtagged for maximum engagement. She'd married Ryan Cooper 2 years ago in a wedding that had been featured in a regional wedding magazine. Ryan was a real estate developer, one of those guys who always seemed to be closing deals and wearing expensive watches and talking about investment opportunities. He and Nicole lived in a renovated Craftsman in Eugene, about 2 hours south of Portland, close enough for family gatherings but far enough that we didn't see each other constantly. Which had been fine with me, especially after the miscarriages started. Nicole's relentless positivity, her assumption that everything would work out if you just manifested hard enough, had become exhausting to be around. My parents, Margaret and Robert Winters, lived in the same house in Beaverton where Nicole and I had grown up. Dad was retired from his job as an accountant, spending his days golfing and tinkering in his workshop. Mom had worked as an administrative assistant at a dental office until last year, when she'd retired to focus on volunteer work, and, increasingly, on being available for Nicole. Mom had always favored Nicole, not in any dramatic or abusive way, just in the 1,000 small ways that accumulated over a lifetime. Nicole's achievements were celebrated loudly, while mine were acknowledged quietly. Nicole's problems required immediate family summits while mine were met with practical advice, and an assumption I'd handle them myself. After the miscarriages, Mom had said all the right words, but there was a distance in her sympathy, as if she didn't quite know how to process grief that didn't resolve neatly. The worst part of the miscarriages hadn't been the physical pain, though that had been substantial. It hadn't even been the loss itself, though that had carved out pieces of me I'd never get back. The worst part had been choosing names. Daniel and I had decided early on that we'd name each baby, even the ones we lost, because they deserved to be remembered as more than medical events. Lily Grace had been 12 weeks along when my body betrayed us. I'd started bleeding at work, had known immediately what was happening, and had driven myself to the hospital because Daniel had been in a meeting he couldn't leave. By the time he arrived, it was over. We'd named her Lily after Daniel's grandmother, Grace after the concept we desperately needed. Oliver James had made it further 23 weeks, long enough that we'd felt him move, long enough that I'd started showing, long enough that colleagues had begun asking when I was due. The anatomy scan had revealed problems, severe ones, and the doctors had used words like incompatible with life and comfort care. We'd held him after he was born, his tiny fingers perfect, his chest rising and falling 27 times before stopping. Oliver was my grandfather's name. James was Daniel's middle name. We'd buried him in Greenwood Cemetery under a small stone that said, "Forever our son." Sophie Rose had been the cruelest because she'd come after months of trying again, after we'd convinced ourselves that maybe the universe would be kind this time. 8 weeks in, routine blood work showed hormone levels that weren't rising properly. The doctor had been gentle but clear about what that meant. We'd named her Sophie because it meant wisdom, and Rose because I'd always loved roses, had imagined a little girl who'd help me plant them in whatever backyard we'd eventually have. After Sophie, Daniel and I had stopped trying. We'd gone to see Dr. Amanda Foster, a therapist who specialized in pregnancy loss. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And she'd helped us navigate the decision to step back, to focus on healing rather than hoping. We'd planted 3 dogwood trees in Forest Park, one for each baby, in a quiet spot off the main trail where we could visit without running into joggers or families. We'd carved their names into smooth river stones and placed them at the base of each tree. Those names were ours, private and sacred, shared only with Daniel's parents during a tearful phone call, and with Jess over wine and wreckage. I hadn't told Nicole the names. She'd known about the miscarriages, had sent flowers and text messages full of heart emojis, but I'd kept the details sparse. Nicole lived her life online, and I couldn't bear the thought of my baby's name showing up in an Instagram caption about family struggles or resilience, or whatever narrative she'd craft. So when she'd asked early on if we'd name them, I'd deflected. I'd said we were keeping that private. She'd seemed to accept that, had moved on to other topics, and I'd thought that was the end of it. Except it wasn't. Because somehow Nicole had found out those names. And now, 10 months after Sophie, 17 months after Oliver, and 26 months after Lily, Nicole had given birth to triplets and had named them after my dead children. When she'd first told me she was pregnant with triplets, I'd felt that complicated mix of happiness and envy that had become familiar. I was genuinely glad for her, or at least I was trying to be genuine, trying to be the supportive sister who could celebrate other people's joy without making it about her own pain. Nicole had documented the entire pregnancy online, posting bump updates and gender reveal videos and nursery decoration progress. Her followers had eaten it up, her engagement rates apparently skyrocketing as her belly grew. The babies had been born 2 weeks ago, healthy and perfect, 2 girls and a boy. Nicole had posted a photo from the hospital, her hair somehow perfect despite having just delivered 3 humans, Ryan beside her looking proud, and the caption had read, "Our miracle trio is here. Names to be revealed soon." I texted my congratulations, had sent a gift card for baby supplies, had planned to visit once they were settled at home. I hadn't expected a phone call at 10 at night, Nicole's voice bright with excitement, telling me she had something special to share. "We named them," she'd said, and I'd heard the rustle of babies in the background, that distinctive newborn squeaking that still made my stomach clench. "I wanted you to be one of the first to know because this is really for you." That phrase, "this is really for you," should have been my first warning. But I'd been tired, had just finished a 12-hour shift, and I wasn't processing quickly enough. "That's sweet," I'd said, reaching for the politeness that had become my default. "What did you choose?" "Lily Grace, Oliver James, and Sophie Rose," Nicole had said, her voice full of that performing enthusiasm she used in her videos. "We're naming them after your babies, Ella. I know how much those names meant to you, and I thought what better way to honor them than to let those names finally live. You couldn't complete your family, so I'm completing it for you. Now when you hear those names, you'll have living children to associate them with instead of just sadness. Isn't that beautiful?" I'd frozen, my phone pressed against my ear. Daniel looking up from his laptop with concern creasing his forehead. "You what?" I'd finally managed, my voice barely audible. "I named them after Lily, Oliver, and Sophie," Nicole had repeated, slower this time, as if I hadn't understood. "Ryan and I talked about it, and we thought it would be such a meaningful tribute. Plus, the names are so pretty, and they sound perfect together for triplets. I was going to post about it tomorrow with the whole story about how you inspired us. My followers are going to love it." Something cold and sharp had settled in my chest. "Nicole, those were my children's names." "I know. That's what makes it so special. Now those names get to be used. They get to live. You should be happy about this, Ella. I'm giving you a gift." I'd looked at Daniel, whose expression had shifted from concern to dawning horror as he'd pieced together what he was hearing. "Those names weren't yours to use," I'd said, my voice shaking now, the careful control I'd maintained for months starting to crack. "We chose them for our babies. They're not inspiration, they're not content. They're the only thing we have left of our children." Nicole had gone quiet, and in the background I'd heard Ryan say something I couldn't make out. Then Nicole had sighed, that particular sigh she'd used since we were teenagers when she thought I was being unreasonable. "I thought you'd be happy," she'd said, her tone shifting to hurt. "I'm trying to do something nice to help you heal. But if you're going to be selfish about it, I guess that's your choice. I already submitted the birth certificates, so the names are final anyway." The next morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that Portland specializes in, the sky a flat sheet of clouds that promised rain without committing to it. I'd barely slept, lying beside Daniel in the dark while my mind replayed Nicole's words on an endless loop. Now those names get to be used. They get to live. As if my children hadn't lived, as if the 23 weeks I'd carried Oliver didn't count, as if the way Lily had moved inside me during those 12 precious weeks had been imaginary. I'd felt Daniel awake beside me too, his breathing wrong for sleep, but neither of us had spoken. What was there to say that hadn't already been said in the immediate aftermath of the call, when I'd sat on our kitchen floor and cried so hard I'd thrown up? My shift at Riverside Memorial started at 7, which meant I had to pull myself together by 6. I stood in the shower longer than usual, letting the hot water beat against my shoulders while I practiced the neutral expression I'd need to get through the day. My face in the bathroom mirror looked gray, my eyes puffy despite the cold compress I'd held against them. Daniel appeared behind me, already dressed in his work clothes, and wrapped his arms around my waist without saying anything. We stood like that for several minutes, his chin resting on my shoulder, both of us staring at our reflection in the steamed mirror. "You don't have to go in," he finally said. "You could call out sick." I shook my head. Staying home meant sitting with my thoughts, and my thoughts were dangerous right now. Work meant distraction, meant focusing on other people's problems, meant being Nurse Ella, who was competent and caring, and hadn't just had her grief repurposed as someone else's inspiration. "I need to go," I said. "I need normal." Except nothing felt normal anymore. The drive to the hospital was mechanical, my hands on the wheel but my mind somewhere else entirely. How had Nicole gotten those names? I'd been so careful not to share them. Had she somehow accessed medical records, found the death certificates? That seemed impossible. A violation of privacy laws that even Nicole wouldn't cross. Had Daniel's parents told her? They'd been devastated by the losses, had cried with us over each one, but they'd respected our wishes about privacy. Had Jess said something accidentally? No, that was impossible. Jess understood the sacredness of those names better than anyone. The hospital parking garage was half full, the usual early morning collection of night shift workers heading home and day shift arriving with coffee cups and tired faces. I parked in my usual spot on the third level, gathered my bag and made my way to the pediatric wing. The elevator smelled like industrial cleaner and something faintly sweet, maybe someone's breakfast. A doctor I didn't know well nodded at me as we rode up together. I managed a smile that felt like it belonged on someone else's face. The pediatric nurses' station was its usual controlled chaos. Charts scattered across the desk, phones ringing, someone's half-eaten bagel abandoned beside a computer. My colleague Claire looked up as I approached, her expression immediately concerned. Claire was in her mid-40s, had 3 kids of her own, and had been at Riverside longer than I'd been alive. She'd worked the night shift and was preparing to hand off her patients. "You look like hell," she said, which was Claire's version of gentle concern. "What happened?" I hadn't planned to tell anyone, had thought I'd just bury it under the weight of work tasks and patient care. But Claire's directness cracked something open. "My sister named her Triplets after my miscarried babies," I heard myself say, the words tumbling out flat and strange. "She said she was completing my family for me." Claire's face went through several expressions in quick succession: shock, confusion, anger, before settling on something fierce and protective. "She did what?" "Lily Grace, Oliver James and Sophie Rose," I said, my voice steady despite the way my hands were shaking. "Those were my babies' names. The ones Daniel and I chose. The ones we put on the memorial stones. And Nicole just took them." "How did she even know the names?" Claire asked, setting down the chart she'd been holding. "You said you kept that private." "I don't know. That's what I've been trying to figure out. I never posted about them, never mentioned them in family group chats. Daniel and I were so careful." A thought occurred to me, one that made my stomach turn. Unless she went through my things when she visited last year. That visit had been for Thanksgiving, 6 months after Oliver's death and 2 months before Sophie's conception. Nicole and Ryan had stayed with us for 3 days, and I remembered Nicole had been unusually interested in seeing our apartment, had wandered through rooms while I was cooking, had asked questions about where we kept things. I thought she was just being nosy in that casual sister way. But what if she'd gone through the memory box Daniel and I kept in our closet? The box with hospital bracelets and ultrasound photos and the small journal where I'd written letters to each baby? "That's a violation," Claire said, her voice hard. "That's not just insensitive, that's deliberately cruel." "She doesn't think so. She thinks she's doing me a favor. She actually said I should be happy about it." I laughed, a bitter sound that hurt coming out. "She's planning to post about it on Instagram tomorrow, the whole story about how I inspired her, how she's honoring my losses." Claire muttered something under her breath that I didn't quite catch, but that sounded profane. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. What can I do?" "She already submitted the birth certificates. The names are legal now." I felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. "I have to get through this shift first. I'll figure out the rest later." But getting through the shift proved harder than I'd anticipated. My first patient was a 2-month-old with RSV, struggling to breathe, her parents exhausted and terrified. I performed my duties with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, adjusting oxygen levels, offering reassurance to parents who looked like they hadn't slept in days. The baby's name was Emma. Not Lily, not Sophie, just Emma. But every time I looked at her, I thought about how Lily would have been over 2 years old now, how Sophie would have been approaching her first birthday. My second patient was a 5-year-old boy recovering from appendix surgery, cranky and demanding and convinced that the hospital was secretly a prison. His name was Marcus. Not Oliver. But he had the same dark hair Oliver had in the ultrasound photos, and when he grabbed my hand while I was checking his grip was exactly the strength I'd imagined Oliver's would have been at that age. By lunch I was barely holding it together. I took my break in the small staff lounge on the second floor, a windowless room with a refrigerator that hummed too loud and a couch with a suspicious stain on one cushion. I sat in the corner with my phone, staring at Nicole's Instagram without opening it, knowing what I'd find there but unable to stop myself from looking. Her most recent post was from yesterday, a photo of her in the hospital bed, looking impossibly put together for someone who just delivered 3 babies. The caption read, "Our hearts are so full. Baby A, Baby B, and Baby C are here and perfect. Names coming soon, and trust me, the meaning behind them is going to make you cry happy tears. This journey has taught me so much about family, love, and honoring the people who matter most." The comments section was full of heart emojis and congratulations, and people begging to know the names. Several of Nicole's regular followers had started guessing, throwing out trendy name combinations. Nobody had guessed correctly because why would they? Why would anyone guess that an influencer had stolen her sister's dead baby's names? I closed Instagram before I could do something stupid like comment, and opened my text messages instead. There were 3 from Daniel checking in asking how I was holding up. 1 from Jess saying she'd heard what happened from Daniel and was here if I needed to talk. And 1 from my mother sent at 8 this morning. Nicole told me about the baby's names. I think it's a beautiful gesture. Try to see it as the gift it is. That text hit me like a physical blow. My mother knew and thought it was beautiful. Of course she did. In Margaret Winters's world, Nicole could do no wrong, and I was the difficult one for having feelings about it. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on saying nothing at all. What could I possibly say that wouldn't come out as pure rage? The rest of my shift crawled by. I took care of a teenager with a broken leg from a skateboarding accident, twin infants in for jaundice treatment, and a 7-year-old with a severe allergic reaction who'd eaten peanuts at a birthday party. Each patient got the professional, compassionate care they deserved, but I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body, going through motions that my hands remembered even while my mind was elsewhere. Claire checked on me twice, appearing at my elbow with knowing looks and quiet questions about whether I was okay. The second time she pulled me aside during a lull and said, "Look, I know you're trying to power through, but you're allowed to fall apart. What your sister did is unforgivable." "My mom thinks it's beautiful," I said, and heard how hollow my voice sounded. "She texted me this morning to say I should see it as a gift." "Your mom is wrong," Claire said bluntly, "and enabling. I've seen this before, families where one kid can do no wrong, and the other one is expected to just accept whatever gets thrown at them. It's toxic, and you don't have to participate in it." Her words settled somewhere in my chest, a counterweight to Nicole's chirpy cruelty and my mother's blind support. Maybe I wasn't crazy for being hurt. Maybe this wasn't something I needed to get over or reframe or see from a different angle. Maybe it was just wrong, plainly and simply wrong, and I was allowed to be angry about it. When my shift finally ended at 7, the sky had darkened to full night, the rain that had threatened all day finally arriving in steady sheets. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 10 minutes before starting the engine, watching water stream down the windshield, trying to gather the energy to drive home. My phone buzzed with another text from Nicole. "Mom said you're upset. Can we talk? I really want you to understand that I did this out of love." Out of love. As if love justified anything, as if slapping the label of love on an action made it automatically acceptable. I thought about all the things I wanted to say to her. That love doesn't steal. That love doesn't perform grief for social media engagement. That love doesn't take the most painful experience of someone's life and turn it into content. But I was too tired for that conversation, too raw, too afraid of what would come out if I started talking. Instead, I drove home through rain-slicked streets, Portland's traffic lights blurring through my tears into abstract smears of red and green. The apartment was dark when I arrived, Daniel still at work or maybe at the gym, his usual Monday evening routine. I dropped my bag by the door, didn't bother turning on lights, just made my way to the second bedroom, the empty one we never talked about. The room was exactly as we'd left it, bare walls painted a neutral beige, carpet that had come with the apartment, a single box in the corner containing things we'd bought before the miscarriages. A crib we'd assembled after Lily's ultrasound showed everything looked healthy, tiny clothes we'd picked out together, Daniel holding up onesies with ridiculous sayings while I laughed, a mobile with soft animals that was supposed to hang above the crib. We'd never unpacked that box after Oliver had just taped it shut and put it in the corner where we wouldn't have to look at it. I sat on the floor in the dark, my back against the wall, and let myself cry the way I hadn't allowed myself to cry at work. Deep, ugly sobs that hurt my ribs, the kind of crying that left you hollowed out and exhausted. I cried for Lily and Oliver and Sophie, for the versions of them I'd imagined and would never meet. I cried for the names that had been ours alone, that we'd whispered in hospital rooms and carved into stones, that were now going to be shouted at playgrounds and written on birthday cakes for children who weren't mine. I cried because Nicole would post photos of her Lily, her Oliver, her Sophie, and people would coo over how beautiful the names were, never knowing they were stolen from graves. I cried because my mother thought this was a gift, because apparently my grief was less important than Nicole's creative naming choices. I cried because I'd spent 2 years trying to heal, trying to build something resembling peace, and it had all been shattered with one phone call. Daniel found me there eventually, sometime after 8, the apartment still dark except for the faint light coming from the hallway. He sat down beside me without speaking, pulled me against his chest, and let me soak his shirt with tears and snot and all the ugliness I'd been holding in. His presence was the only solid thing in a world that felt like it was dissolving. "I called my parents," he said finally, his voice quiet in the darkness. "They swear they didn't tell Nicole the names. They're furious about what she did." "Then how did she know?" I asked, my voice wrecked. "From crying. How did she find out?" "I think you were right about Thanksgiving. I think she went through our things. There's no other explanation." Daniel's arms tightened around me. "I'm so sorry, Ella. I should have been more careful. I should have hidden that box better." "It's not your fault," I said, though part of me wanted to blame anyone for this. "It's hers. She went through our private things, found the most painful part of our lives, and decided it was hers to use." We sat there for a long time, maybe an hour, not talking, just existing in the wreckage of what Nicole had done. The rain hammered against the windows, and somewhere in the building, someone was playing music, the bass thumping through the walls. Normal sounds of normal lives, while ours felt like it was splitting apart. "What do we do?" Daniel finally asked. "Do we confront her? Talk to your parents? Just cut contact?" "I don't know," I admitted. "She already submitted the birth certificates. The names are legal. I can't change that. And if I make a scene, I'll be the villain. Nicole will paint herself as the well-meaning sister whose gift was rejected, and everyone will believe her because that's how it always works." Daniel was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know what? I don't care if she paints you as the villain. What she did is wrong. It doesn't matter how she tries to spin it. Those were our children's names, and she stole them." His anger, clean and protective, made something shift inside me. I'd been so focused on whether I was allowed to be hurt, whether my feelings were valid, whether I was overreacting. But Daniel's certainty cut through all of that. He thought I was right to be angry. He thought Nicole was wrong. That mattered more than I could articulate. "I need to talk to Jess," I said, pulling back slightly to look at Daniel's face in the dim light from the hallway. "I need someone outside our marriage to tell me I'm not insane." "You're not insane," Daniel said firmly. "But yes, call Jess. Call her right now if you want. I'll make dinner something easy. You talk to your friend." I nodded, grateful beyond words for his steadiness, for the way he could be angry on my behalf while still being gentle with me. We extracted ourselves from the floor, my legs stiff from sitting in one position too long. Daniel headed to the kitchen while I took my phone to the bedroom and called Jess. She answered on the second ring. I've been waiting for you to call. Daniel texted me what happened. I'm losing my mind over here. Just hearing her voice, familiar and fierce, made my eyes fill again. Tell me I'm not overreacting. You're not overreacting. You're underreacting if anything. I would have driven to Eugene and burned her house down. Jess's voice was sharp with anger. What was she thinking? How did she even justify this to herself? She thinks she's honoring them. She thinks she's giving me a gift by letting those names live. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulling my knees up to my chest. My mom agrees with her. She texted me this morning to say it was beautiful. Of course Margaret does, Jess said, and I could hear her moving around, probably pacing the way she did when she was agitated. Because Nicole is perfect and can do no wrong, and you're supposed to just be grateful for whatever scraps of acknowledgement you get. I've watched your family dynamic for 10 years, Ella, and it's been toxic that entire time. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Part of me wants to call her and scream. Part of me wants to post something on social media exposing what she did. Part of me just wants to disappear and never talk to any of them again. All of those are valid options, Jess said. But here's what I think you should do first. Document everything. Screenshot that text from your mom. Screenshot Nicole's Instagram posts. Write down exactly what Nicole said on the phone, word for word, while you still remember. Because if this escalates, if she tries to make you look like the bad guy, you need evidence. That practical advice cut through some of my emotional fog. Jess was right. Nicole lived her life online, performed everything for an audience. If I was going to confront her, I needed to be prepared for her to weaponize social media against me. Okay, I said. I can do that. And then, Jess continued, her voice softening slightly, you need to decide what relationship you want with Nicole going forward. Because this isn't something you can just get past. This is fundamental. She violated something sacred, and she doesn't even think she did anything wrong. That's not going to change. The truth of that settled heavy in my chest. Nicole wasn't going to apologize, wasn't going to see this from my perspective, wasn't going to take the names back even if she could. She'd already decided she was right. Already crafted the narrative she'd share with her followers. I could either accept that and swallow my pain, or I could draw a line and accept the consequences. I think I need to cut her out of my life. I heard myself say, the words surprising me even as they felt true. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep being the sister who's expected to understand and forgive, and make allowances. She took something that wasn't hers, and I don't think I can ever forgive that. Then don't, Jess said simply. You don't owe her forgiveness. You don't owe her a relationship. You get to protect yourself, Ella. You've lost enough. You don't have to lose your boundaries too. We talked for another 20 minutes, Jess letting me process out loud, offering the kind of validation I desperately needed. By the time we hung up, I felt marginally more solid, like I'd found the edges of myself again after feeling like I was dissolving. Daniel had made pasta, something simple with marinara sauce, and we ate in front of the TV with the sound low, not really watching whatever show was on. That night, lying in bed, I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything Jess had suggested. I screenshotted my mother's text. I saved Nicole's Instagram posts. I opened the Notes app and wrote down everything I could remember from Nicole's phone call. Her exact words, the way she'd said I should be happy, the casual cruelty of already submitted the birth certificate so the names are final anyway. Tomorrow Nicole would make her big announcement. Tomorrow hundreds or thousands of people would see those names and think they were beautiful, creative, meaningful. They'd applaud Nicole for her touching tribute. They'd have no idea those names were stolen from a sister's grief, repurposed as content, turned into engagement metrics. But I would know. And I would remember. And I would decide finally that my pain mattered more than keeping peace in a family that had never protected me the way it protected Nicole. The notification came at exactly 9 in the morning, while I was pouring my second cup of coffee and trying to convince myself I was ready to face another shift at the hospital. My phone lit up with an Instagram alert, Nicole's perfectly curated post. Appearing on my screen like a grenade with the pin already pulled. I'd known it was coming, had spent all night preparing myself for it, but seeing it still felt like being punched in the stomach. The photo showed Nicole in her meticulously decorated nursery, pastel colors and bohemian wall hangings creating that effortlessly aesthetic vibe her followers loved. She held all 3 babies, 2 tucked in her arms and 1 somehow balanced against her shoulder, all of them impossibly peaceful. Her hair fell in loose waves, her makeup subtle but flawless, her smile radiant. She looked like a goddess of motherhood, serene and glowing. Nothing like the exhausted wreck most people are 2 weeks postpartum. The caption was worse than I'd imagined. "Meet our miracles," it began, followed by 3 baby bottle emojis and a heart. Lily Grace Cooper, Oliver James Cooper, and Sophie Rose Cooper. These names carry so much meaning, and I'm honored to share their story with you all. My sister Ella experienced 3 devastating miscarriages over the past 2 years. Each time, she and her husband chose beautiful names for the babies they lost. Lily Grace, Oliver James, and Sophie Rose. Names that deserve to be spoken, to be celebrated, to live beyond grief. I had to set my coffee cup down because my hands were shaking too badly to hold it. Daniel appeared behind me, reading over my shoulder, his sharp intake of breath telling me he was seeing the same words I was. Nicole's caption continued, each sentence somehow worse than the last. When Ryan and I found out we were having triplets, I knew immediately what their names should be. I wanted to honor Ella's journey, to give those precious names the life they deserved. Ella couldn't complete her family, but in a way, I'm completing it for her. Every time she sees my babies, she'll have living, breathing children to associate with those names instead of only sadness. It's my gift to her, my way of saying that loss doesn't have to be the end of the story. Love wins. Life wins. And these 3 perfect souls are proof that beauty can come from pain. The post had been up for less than 10 minutes and already had over 300 comments. I scrolled through them, each one making me feel sicker. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever read. You're such an amazing sister. Ella is so lucky to have you. Those babies are going to grow up knowing they honor such a special legacy. I'm literally crying, this is so touching. A few people asked if Ella was okay with this, their comments quickly buried under the avalanche of praise. Nicole had replied to one of those with "She's processing it, but I know in her heart she understands the love behind this gesture." As if she knew anything about what was in my heart. As if she had any right to speak for me. Daniel's hand found my shoulder, squeezing gently. "She made you part of her content," he said, his voice tight with anger. "She took your private tragedy and turned it into engagement bait. That's beyond forgivable, Ella." I couldn't speak. I was reading the comments, watching strangers praise my sister for violating the most intimate grief of my life. Someone had commented asking for links to buy the same nursery decor Nicole had. Someone else wanted to know what baby carriers she was using because they looked so stylish. The names of my dead children, the losses that had nearly destroyed me, had been reduced to a touching backstory for an influencer's brand. My phone started ringing. Nicole's name flashed across the screen, her smiling profile picture a mockery. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. I declined again. A text came through. "Ella, please pick up. I want to talk about the post. The response has been so amazing and I think you'll be happy when you see how many people are touched by Lily, Oliver and Sophie's story. Their story. As if they had a story beyond the one where they died inside me. As if Nicole had any claim to their narrative at all." Another text came, this time from my mother. "I saw Nicole's post. It's lovely, sweetheart. I know change is hard for you, but try to see this as healing. Nicole is trying to help you move forward." I stared at that message, at the casual dismissal of my feelings wrapped in concerned trolling. Change is hard for you. As if my objection to having my trauma exploited was just me being resistant to change rather than a reasonable response to a violation. Nicole is trying to help you, as if help could ever look like this, as if anyone had asked Nicole to help in the first place. Jess's text came through next, just 3 words. "I'm coming over. I have work." I texted back. But my hands were still shaking and I knew I wasn't going to make it through a shift. Not today. Not when Nicole's post was blowing up online and my mother was siding with her, and the entire internet thought this was beautiful instead of grotesque. "Call out sick," Jess replied. "I'm already in my car. Be there in 15. Daniel took my phone gently from my hands and set it face down on the counter. "She's right. You need to call out. You can't work like this. I can't just fall apart every time Nicole does something horrible." I said, but even as I said it, I knew it was a losing argument. I can't let her have that kind of power over my life. You're not falling apart, Daniel said firmly. You're having a completely normal reaction to your sister publicly exploiting your grief without your permission. That's not weakness, that's being human. I let him call my supervisor while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee growing cold. Claire answered, and I could hear Daniel explaining that I had a family emergency and needed the day off. He was good at this, at handling logistics when I couldn't, at being the functional one when my world was tilting sideways. I heard him thank Claire and end the call, then felt him sit down beside me. She said to take care of yourself and not worry about coverage, he reported. She also said, and I quote, "Your sister is a piece of work." That startled a laugh out of me, sharp and bitter but genuine. Claire's not wrong. Jess arrived in 12 minutes, which meant she'd driven too fast and probably run at least one red light. She burst through our apartment door looking ready for battle, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt that said, "Nevertheless," she persisted in faded letters. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug that felt like the only safe thing in the world. "Show me the post," she demanded when she finally let go. I handed her my phone and watched her face cycle through expressions as she read. Shock first, then disbelief, then a rage so pure it was almost beautiful. "She did not," Jess breathed. "She did not just use your miscarriages as content. She did not just tell thousands of strangers about the worst experiences of your life without asking. She did not just position herself as some kind of hero for stealing your baby's names. She did," I said, my voice flat. "And everyone thinks it's touching. Look at the comments." Jess scrolled, her jaw getting tighter with each swipe. "These people are idiots. They're buying the narrative she's selling without questioning whether you wanted your story sold in the first place." She looked up at me, her eyes fierce. "You need to respond. You need to tell your side before this becomes the accepted version of events." "I don't want to fight her publicly," I said. Though part of me absolutely did want to fight her publicly, wanted to expose every manipulation and cruelty, wanted the internet to see Nicole for what she really was. That's what she wants. Drama equals engagement. If I comment on her post or make my own, I'm just feeding her algorithm. "So what's your alternative?" Jess challenged. "Let her control the narrative? Let everyone believe you're grateful for this?" Daniel, who'd been making tea none of us had asked for, spoke up quietly. "What about a private message? To Nicole directly, making it clear this isn't okay, documenting your objection in writing so she can't claim later that you were fine with it." That felt more manageable than a public confrontation. I took my phone back from Jess and opened my messages with Nicole. The last text was still her insisting we talk, that I'd be happy about the response. I started typing, deleting, retyping, trying to find words that captured the magnitude of what she'd done without dissolving into incoherence. Finally, I settled on, "What you did was not a gift. You took the names of my dead children without permission and used them for your social media content. You told my story without consent. You violated my grief in the most public way possible. Those names were sacred to me and Daniel, and you had no right to them. I need you to take down the post and issue a correction explaining that you didn't have my blessing for any of this." I read it out loud to Daniel and Jess. Jess nodded approvingly. "It's clear and direct. She can't misinterpret that." "She'll find a way," I said, but hit send anyway. The message showed as delivered, then read almost immediately. 3 dots appeared, indicating Nicole was typing. Her response came in a flurry of texts, each one landing like a slap. "I can't believe you're being like this. I did something beautiful and you're trying to ruin it. Do you know how much engagement this post is getting? This could really help my brand and you're making it about yourself." I stared at that last sentence, reading it 3 times to make sure I'd understood correctly. "You're making it about yourself." As if the post wasn't about my miscarriages, my losses, my babies. As if I was being selfish for objecting to having my tragedy monetized. "Are you seeing this?" I asked Daniel and Jess, turning the phone so they could read. "She's unbelievable," Daniel said, his voice carefully controlled in that way that meant he was furious. "She genuinely doesn't understand why this is wrong." More text from Nicole. "I'm not taking down the post. It's already been shared hundreds of times. People are touched by it. You need to think about the bigger picture here. This could bring awareness to pregnancy loss. You're being selfish by making this about your feelings instead of about helping other women. Helping other women, Jess repeated incredulously. By exploiting her sister's trauma without consent. That's not help, that's opportunism. I typed back. You didn't ask if I wanted to be part of raising awareness. You didn't give me a choice about sharing my story. And you definitely didn't have permission to use my baby's names. This isn't about the bigger picture. This is about you violating my boundaries and then getting mad that I'm not grateful. The typing dots appeared and disappeared several times before Nicole's next message came through. Fine. If you're going to be like this, don't expect me to include you in the triplets' lives. I was going to invite you to be a big part of raising them, but if you can't support me, then maybe it's better if you stay away. That threat landed differently than she probably intended. The idea of staying away from Nicole and her stolen name babies didn't fill me with dread. It filled me with relief. Okay. I typed back. I'll stay away. And I need you to stop contacting me for a while. I need space from you. Nicole's response was immediate and vicious. You're just jealous because I have healthy babies and you don't. You've always been jealous of me. This is just another example of you not being able to handle when good things happen to me. I felt that accusation like a physical blow, even though I'd heard variations of it my entire life. Anytime I'd objected to Nicole's behavior, anytime I'd set a boundary or expressed hurt, it got reframed as jealousy. As if the only possible reason to be upset with Nicole was envy, as if she was too perfect to legitimately wrong someone. Jess grabbed the phone from my hand before I could respond. Do not engage with that, she said firmly. She's baiting you. She wants you to lose your temper so she can screenshot it and play victim. You've said what you needed to say. Now you block her. I can't block my sister, I protested, even though I wanted to. Yes, you can, Daniel said, coming to sit on my other side. You absolutely can. She just accused you of being jealous of her healthy babies after you lost 3. That's unforgivable, Ella. That's not something you come back from. He was right. Some lines once crossed couldn't be uncrossed. Nicole had always been thoughtless, had always centered herself in every situation, but this was different. This was calculated cruelty dressed up as confusion about why I was upset. This was manipulation at its finest, taking my legitimate grievance and twisting it into character assassination. I took my phone back from Jess and before I could talk myself out of it, blocked Nicole's number. Then I blocked her on Instagram, on Facebook, on every platform where she could reach me. Each block felt like removing a fishhook from my skin. Painful but necessary. Good, Jess said with satisfaction. Now you're mom. I'm not blocking my mom, I said, but even as I said it, I was opening her text thread, rereading her message about how Nicole was trying to help me move forward. You don't have to block her, Daniel said carefully, but you need to respond. You need to make it clear where you stand so there's no ambiguity later. I started typing a message to my mother, my fingers clumsy with emotion. Mom, what Nicole did was not okay. She used my miscarriages as content without permission. She took names that were private and sacred and made them public. I asked her to take down the post and she refused. She then accused me of being jealous of her healthy babies. I need you to understand that this isn't me being difficult or resistant to change. This is me setting a boundary after a serious violation. I need you to support me on this. I hit send before I could soften the message, before I could add qualifiers or apologies, or make it easier for my mother to dismiss my feelings. The message sat there for several minutes, unread. Then the read receipt appeared, followed by typing dots that lasted so long I thought I'd get a paragraph. What came instead was 2 sentences. I think you're overreacting. Nicole meant well and you're hurting her feelings by making this into a fight. Something inside me that had been bending for 31 years finally broke. Not with drama or noise, but with a quiet snap that I felt in my bones. My mother had chosen Nicole's feelings over my legitimate grievance. Again. Like she always did. Like she always would. I'm done, I said out loud, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. Daniel and Jess both looked at me with identical concerned expressions. I'm done trying to make her understand. I'm done hoping she'll choose me for once. I'm just done. What does that mean? Daniel asked gently. It means I'm blocking her too, I said, and did it before I could change my mind. Margaret Winters's number blocked. Her Facebook blocked. Every avenue she had to tell me I was overreacting or being difficult or hurting Nicole's feelings, closed off. Jess let out a long breath. How do you feel? I took inventory of my emotional state, expecting devastation or panic or regret. Instead, I felt lighter. Emptier, but in a good way, like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to not carry it. I feel okay, I said, surprised by the truth of it. I feel like I can breathe. My phone started ringing, my father's name appearing on the screen. I looked at Daniel and Jess, who both nodded encouragement. I answered, putting it on speaker. Ella. My dad's voice came through, careful and uncertain. Your mother is very upset. She says you blocked her. I did, I confirmed, keeping my voice steady. She sided with Nicole after Nicole violated my privacy and refused to take down a post exploiting my miscarriages. I asked for basic support and got told I was overreacting. So yes, I blocked her. There was a long pause. My father had always been the peacekeeper in our family, the one who smoothed things over and encouraged everyone to get along. I braced myself for him to tell me to apologize, to make peace, to be the bigger person. Instead, he said, I read Nicole's post. Your mother showed it to me. And I need you to know that I don't think it's okay. I didn't know those were the names you'd chosen for your babies. We would never have shared them if we'd known. Whatever Nicole told you about getting them from us is a lie. I felt tears starting and blinked them back. Then how did she know? I asked her that, my dad said, his voice heavy. She admitted she went through your things during Thanksgiving. She found your memory box and looked through it. She said she thought the names were too beautiful not to use, that you'd be happy to hear them spoken instead of forgotten. The confirmation of what I'd suspected didn't make it hurt less. Nicole had deliberately invaded my privacy, had stolen something irreplaceable, and had convinced herself it was fine because her intentions were good. Or more likely, because she wanted unique names for her triplets and decided mine were available for the taking. I'm sorry, Ella, my dad continued. I should have said something when your mother called Nicole's post beautiful. I should have defended you. I'm saying it now. What Nicole did was wrong, and you have every right to be angry. Those words, coming from my father who almost never took sides, broke something open in me. I started crying. Not the angry tears from before, but something deeper. A grief that had been waiting for someone in my family to validate it. Daniel wrapped an arm around me while Jess squeezed my hand. Thank you, I managed to say. That means more than you know. I'm going to talk to Nicole, my dad said. I'm going to make it clear that this wasn't acceptable. I don't know if it will change anything, but she needs to hear it from someone besides you. We talked for a few more minutes, my dad apologizing again, me assuring him I wasn't angry at him. When we hung up, I felt marginally more stable, like I'd found one solid piece of ground in the earthquake of the past 2 days. Your dad came through, Jess observed. That's something. It is, I agreed. But it doesn't change what Nicole did, or what my mom said, or the fact that hundreds of strangers now know the most painful details of my life because Nicole decided my story was hers to tell. So what's next? Daniel asked. Where do we go from here? I thought about that question, about what I wanted my life to look like now that I'd cut out the people who'd hurt me. I want to focus on us, I said slowly. On our marriage, on my job, on building a life that isn't defined by what I've lost. And I want Nicole and my mom to face consequences for their choices. Not revenge, just natural consequences. They don't get access to me anymore. They don't get my energy or my forgiveness or my continued attempts to make them understand. They just don't get me. That's fair, Jess said. That's healthy boundaries. But I think I need to do one more thing, I added, an idea forming as I spoke. I need to tell my story. My version. Not on Nicole's post, not engaging with her narrative, but somewhere else, somewhere I control. Because right now, the only story out there is hers, and it's a lie. Daniel looked concerned. Are you sure? Going public could open you up to a lot of negativity. I know, I said. But staying silent means letting Nicole's version be the truth. I need people to know what really happened. I need there to be a record that I didn't consent to any of this. Jess was already nodding. Where are you thinking? Your own Instagram post? A blog? I don't know yet, I admitted. I need to think about it, figure out the right way to tell it. But I know I need to tell it. We spent the rest of the morning talking through options, Jess and Daniel helping me process what I wanted to say, and how I wanted to say it. The conversation meandered through different approaches, different platforms, different ways of framing what had happened. Jess suggested starting with a simple statement of facts, letting the events speak for themselves without editorializing. Daniel worried about my privacy, about opening myself up to scrutiny from Nicole's followers who might not believe my version. The thing is, I said, thinking out loud, I don't need everyone to believe me. I just need the truth to exist somewhere besides in my head. Right now, Nicole's Instagram makes it look like this was a mutual decision, like I was involved in choosing those names for her babies. People reading that post have no idea I found out the same way they did, scrolling through social media on a random Tuesday morning. So you need to correct the record, Jess said. Not to change Nicole's mind or convince her followers, but just to have your truth documented. Exactly, I said, feeling like something was crystallizing. I need to know that somewhere, somehow there's evidence that I said no, that I objected, that this wasn't okay with me. We talked about the mechanics of it, where such a statement should live, how detailed it should be. I could write something on my own rarely used Instagram account, but that felt too much like engaging directly with Nicole's audience. I could start a blog, anonymous or otherwise, but that seemed overly complicated for what I needed to say. In the end, Jess suggested something simpler. A private document, dated and saved in multiple locations, outlining exactly what happened and when. Not for public consumption necessarily, but as a record that could be made public if needed. Think of it as insurance, she explained. If Nicole escalates this, if she tries to rewrite history further or accuses you of being supportive initially, you'll have documentation. Your own words in your own time explaining what really happened. That felt right. Not performative, not reactive, just factual. A timeline of events, a statement of boundaries violated, a record of my non-consent. Something that existed independent of Nicole's narrative, but could counter it if necessary. By noon I had the outline of a plan. By evening, I'd have the courage to execute it. And by tomorrow, even if the world still believed Nicole's version, I would have my own truth preserved, protected, ready to deploy if needed. Nicole thought she could control the narrative by getting her version out first. She was about to learn that some stories refused to stay contained, and some sisters refused to stay silent. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.